truthfully, if I just introduce you, I'm going to just talk about what an incredible human you are. I have to say, Julie has been on my radar screen. Julie, I don't know how many years I have known of you and heard of your good works, and I've just seen it increase over the years. You're just such a blessing to our community. Julie's been professionally speaking nationwide for 30 years. A master storyteller, I would agree with that. She uses her unique blend of experience and theatrics to bring her presentations to life. Her training organization, Julie Gave Her Discovery, will soon celebrate 24 years of helping organizations grow better leaders, as well as improve employee engagement and workplace culture. Julie's the author of a 3-part women's book series. I hope you all have read it. If not, it is fantastic. Must Love Shoes, which inspires readers to see the meaning, lesson, and humor in life. As a result of her books, Julie created a niche for women, which encompasses personal and professional development opportunities, domestic and international retreats, book club discussions, and unique social events designed to bring women together for connection and camaraderie. She is most proud of her charity, Souls of Love, which collects and distributes new shoes and winter boots to local children in need. And I believe, Julie, you just finished your Souls of Love.
We did. You're going to hear about that in a bit.
Perfect. So everyone, without further ado, I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to turn this over to Miss Julie Gaver.
Thank you so much, Jen. Oh my goodness. Good morning, all you sheroes and phenomenal women. I am so excited to be here. And just to reiterate something that Jen just said, I know it's kind of ironic that in a week where we are celebrating, women empowerment and women camaraderie and using your voice, that we are going to remind you that we are about to mute you. Okay, so this is the only time that you will be muted. We want you to definitely speak up, speak out, use your voice this week and always. As I said, I'm so excited to be here, but before I begin, I think it's important that now that we're being recorded and it's official, that all of you out in Zoom land, please take a few moments in the chat and let's send Jen and Caitlin and the entire She Week committee, let's send them a little bit of love, some hearts, some great comments, because they have been working so very hard to create this phenomenal event. They have mastered the story of the pivot. So this has, it's been an interesting ride, hasn't it? You talk about a roller coaster ride. This is the epitome of a roller coaster ride. And I have to tell you that I'm scared of roller coasters. And the last time I have been on a roller coaster was 1974. And that roller coaster ride was so traumatic that I have stayed away from them ever since then. And let me set the scene. It was 1974. I was a junior in college. Yes, I said it, a junior in college. And it was spring break. Do y'all remember spring break? Back when things were easy? Well, my girlfriends and I decided that we were going to go to Florida and celebrate spring break, and that's what we did. And one morning, we woke up and we just decided on a whim that we were going to drive to go to Disney and go to Orlando. And we were staying in Daytona, I think. And so it wasn't an easy trip, but we got up, we boarded our cars, and we headed out to Orlando. And so we go to Disney and we're walking around the park when all of a sudden one of my friends sees Space Mountain. How many of you remember Space Mountain? Well, back in the day, Space Mountain was a really big deal because it was in the dark. So in my mind, I'm afraid of heights. I'm scared to death of anything related to being in a small little metal box suspended high in the air. But to be in the dark and do it as well was just beyond my level of comprehension. But feeling a little bit of pressure, I got on this roller coaster with my girlfriends. And on that particular day, on that particular ride, something happened. We're halfway through this ride when all of a sudden the train just stopped. And there we are, suspended high in the air, in the dark, in a tiny little metal capsule, and it had stopped. Well, the interesting thing about that memory that I have is how different everybody's response was to that. There were some people who thought it was hilariously funny and it was so exciting and so fun, and they've got their hands in the air and they're cheering, and they're having a great time with it. They're holding on to the capsule and they're rocking back and forth. Crazy. There were other people who were literally scared to death. They were wailing, they were crying, they were screaming, "Get us down, get us down." You can imagine what that must have felt like. And then there were people like me who waffled back and forth between cussing, yes, I said cussing, and praying, and cussing and praying. And so there were all these different emotions going on in this one isolated incident. And then all of a sudden, the train just started moving again. And it was as if nothing ever happened. And so I opened this story this morning because has 2020 not felt like that? Has it not felt like a huge roller coaster of emotions, and watching all of the different ways that people respond to the same situation that we're in? So over the coming week, you are going to hear lots of stories being shared, and you are going to hear stories of the human spirit. You're going to hear stories of triumph and stories of pride, and you're going to hear women share some of the challenges that they've been on, and you'll hear stories of doubt. And more importantly, I feel confident you're going to hear stories of resiliency and of hope. And I think each of us too will be on a roller coaster of emotions. And so I hope you enjoy the ride. It's going to be a great ride. I just know it. So, as Jen said in my introduction, I have been around for a long time. I have been a storyteller for a very, very long time, because I feel like stories are the best form of communication in order to get your viewpoint across, your cause across. And so today, as we kick off this week, thought it would be appropriate if I shared with you my tips and my tricks on how we can share our stories in a way, how we can choose our narrative so that it is both memorable and it's both impactful. So I realize that there's a lot of people that are online right now, or they may be viewing this a little bit later, who have not met me before, and I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you. So I wanted to start off and tell you just a little bit about what I think and what you can expect. So first of all, even though we are in a virtual environment as opposed to a real brick and mortars kind of environment, I have always believed in conversation instead of presentation, okay? Because to me, conversation is something that is mutual, it's communal, it goes both ways. And so although we are in this virtual environment, I'm going to challenge you and I'm going to ask you to please make this a conversation by using the chat feature. We'll be checking it. Jen and Caitlin will be checking it. I'll be looking at it as well from time to time. So please feel free to make this an interactive conversation. In fact, if I ask a question, whether you're in your office or whether you're in your home and you have kids close by, let's demonstrate to them what true e-learning is like. Shout out the answer, do what you want, say what you want, and talk to me, even though perhaps I can't hear you right now. However, in that vein, because I need people and I need to have conversation, I have asked 3 people to help me, and I will be calling on them from time to time. So you'll have a chance to see them on the screen, and you'll actually have a chance to hear them as well. So please help me welcome and thank Ellen Kaiser. Ellen, I don't see you right now, but I know you're online. There she is. Hi, Ellen. Kelly Bynes, my girl Kelly. Where's Kelly? I know that she's going to be chatting with me as well. She probably went back to get that 3rd cup of coffee. And also Jessica Elzelway. and she is with the library system, and I know Jessica is here as well because we've been kind of texting and chatting. So those three phenomenal sheroes are also going to be sharing some input as well. So the other thing that I wanted you to know about what you can expect from me is that, as Jen mentioned, I've been in the learning industry for 30 years, a really, really long time. And so I strongly believe that learning it's a lot like leadership. It's a lot like love, and it's like parenting and friendship, in that if you're going to be in it, be all in it. Throw yourself into this week, ask questions, do the work, create your own list of questions and your own to-do list of what you want to do as a result of being here with us this week. The last thing that I want you to know is that you will probably notice very quickly in this presentation is that there's not going to be PowerPoint. Those of you who have heard me speak before in real life know that I'm not a PowerPoint girl. I want to see you, I want you to see me, and so I want this to feel like a real life conversation. There is a handout in the booklet that corresponds to my presentation. I invite you to write in it and take notes. But I also want you to not be too tied to it, because I want you to think of the next 90 minutes like a piece of decadent fudge cake. I want you to just enjoy it, and I want you to be in the moment, and I want you to be part of this experience. So just so you have the heads up that there won't be a PowerPoint coming in from time to time. So in the spirit of training and learning and workshops, as I always do in a real life environment, I love to start with some kind of a warm up. Just gets us to know each other a little bit better, and we'll just have a little bit of fun. So I invite you to respond in the text, in the chat room, and I am going to ask my three tribe ladies to help me. But when we think about 2020 and all that we have been through in almost coming up on 9 months, if you were to come up with the title of a movie or a book or a song that captures 2020 for you, what would it be? And I was chatting with some of my friends last night, and I said the first one that came to my mind when someone said, "Oh, a movie or a song title," it was Elton John's "I'm Still Standing." That's going to be mine. So we've got Crazy Train, we've got Dumpster Fire. So let's hear from Ellen. Ellen, do you have what would yours be?
I don't know why, but right off the top of my head, I was thinking of the Rhapsody. All of a sudden I lost the name.
Bohemian Rhapsody?
Yeah, Bohemian Rhapsody. And
yeah,
because there is a video online where they have changed it to the Corona Rhapsody.
okay.
It's very funny. It's very poignant for what everybody's going through. And that, that music is very, you hear it, you know exactly that it's, the Rhapsody song. So
good one. I love it.
Yeah. So if you look for that in YouTube, you will come up with Coronavirus Rhapsody.
Okay, I love it. Jessie, where are you? Is Jessica on?
Good morning.
Hey, girl.
For sure, I think the theme song for 2020 for me would be "Staying Alive" by the Bee Gees.
Yeah.
When I'm in Wegmans and I stop at the 50,000 hand sanitizer stations that they have,
right.
I stop at every one, right? But if it was a movie, I don't know if you remember Billy Madison, where Adam Sandler goes back to kindergarten. That would be 2020 for me, because next week I will also be going back to kindergarten as I sit in the back of my kid's class, and I try to make sure that he pays attention and learns. So yeah, Billy Madison.
We want you singing that song all the way. All right. How about Kelly? Kelly, what would yours be?
For me, I was thinking a song and a book, and the song was Annie, The Sun Will Come Out Tomorrow. And the book was Brene Brown, Rising Strong. And not because I have felt those ways, but because I'm trying to infuse as much as I can so that I will feel those ways.
I love it. I love it. Thank you guys. And we're getting some phenomenal responses. Let me just, the eye of the tiger. Absolutely, Stacy. Thank you. Rocket like a hurricane. Oh my gosh, has it not felt like we've been in the middle of a storm? Living on a prayer.
Living on a prayer. Yeah, I like that one, Jill.
That's a great one. Staying alive. I saw someone said roller coaster, and I'm going to spare you the details, but I remember that song and I can boogie to that one as well. So that's a good one as well. Keep Them Up, Circle of Life is a good one as well. So anyway, just a little bit of fun to get us started and to kind of get us all warmed up. On your handout, I shared a quote that has always had meaning for me. And it's a quote that I try to live by, and especially if it's been playing out in 2020. And I'm going to read it to you. You can definitely refer to it and you'll be able to keep it. But it's a quote about stories and the importance of stories. And it goes like this: stories have been used to dispossess and to malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize. Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity. And so when we think about what we've been through this year, we have had an opportunity to share stories in a way that perhaps we never have dreamed of before, especially as it plays out on social media, since we haven't really been able to spend much time together. Never in recent history had we had an opportunity to really share what our life is like and the stories that we decide that we want to share with the world. So my question for you is, in looking at that quote, have the stories that you share during this year, have they been used to dispossess and malign? Or do your stories encourage? Do they empower? And are your stories being used for good? So I invite you now to think about how your stories have been told since we started all of this in early March. Did you create stories that perhaps made people want to hide or unfriend you? I'm sure that we probably have all done that a couple of times during this, this experience. Or have your stories been accurate, and have they been authentic? And did they give people hope? So when I think about the types of stories that I wanted to share and that I intentionally tried to create a dialogue, both on social media and in the people that I was able to chat with, I wanted to create a story or a theme that's centered around humor, because humor is such a big part of my life, and it's the way that I am able to do a lot of the things that I'm able to do. And I live by this beautiful quote that says, laughter is God's hand on the shoulder of a troubled world. And how more appropriate is that? That we are certainly facing a world right now that is troubled and that is broken, and that laughter is really a gift to us, a survival technique, if you will, that enables us to get through those day-to-day stresses. And so when I think about how was I able to craft stories that gave that kind of light in a dark situation, that would probably have been my overriding theme. Many of you know that if you chat with me on Facebook or social media, that like many of you, we had to make some adjustments in our living arrangements. And for us during the Corona time, my 36-year-old son, who was living in New York City and going to grad school, was forced to kind of get out of town because it was a hot mess up there, and his classes all went to online. And so he moved home, and he stayed home with us for about 8 weeks during the stay-at-home order. And so, you know, it certainly was stressful, and like many people, facing a lot of adjustments and having, you know, a different kind of a living arrangement than what we were used to. And so a lot of my stories centered around the humorous aspects of having an adult son back home living with you. And, you know, there were stresses, but there were also so many very funny moments. And so one of the stories that I shared with people that people were able to relate to, I'm actually going to share with you now. And I'm going to read it because it was in the format of a random musing, and so it's really kind of statements. But it was a way that I want to share with you that we're able to take something that's somewhat stressful and laugh about it. So it goes like this. Since Columbia shut down and New York City is a hotbed of germs, my son Craig has been staying with us. He eats yogurt for breakfast and he gets up every morning for a hike. I eat leftover pizza and I sleep in. Tonight after dinner, he produced a bar of Lindt orange chocolate and he rationed all of us 2 squares. I have impulse issues with chocolate and it would totally be gone if I were alone. But he says to both of us, my husband and I, now we're not going to eat anything else until after breakfast tomorrow morning. I'm pretty sure that I rolled my eyes. And I'm pretty sure that I saw my husband, Dan, smuggle lollipops into his sweatshirt. So yesterday, when I called them for dinner, I said very loudly, "Dinner is ready, bitches," because I thought that was really funny. My son goes, "Mom," like he was so disapproving of the way his mother was talking and behaving. Today, he drove my husband to our CPA, and then he went to pick up groceries, and he acted like he liked it. I love my CPA, but I hate getting groceries, and I complain about it all the time. He is downstairs now with my husband, and they're shouting out Jeopardy answers correctly again. I never get any right unless they ask me questions about flowers. They are laughing and they are sounding like they're having a blast while I'm upstairs watching another issue of Grace and Frankie. It's almost like I've become the child and he's become the parent. Tonight before dinner, when I asked the blessing, I got really choked up and I started to cry a little bit because I started thinking about all of the people who are out of work and the people who are living paycheck to paycheck. And my son, in the middle of that, reached over and placed his hand on top of mine. And I realized that even though he's not even a parent yet, he is already a better one than me. And that was just one example of how I could take a stressful situation and with my theme of finding humor in the madness, create a story that hopefully was encouraging and perhaps empowering. So I had lots of themes, and those themes were called the Chronicles of Prey. And so very often I would share some of the crazy stories of what was going on in our home having him. I had another theme that came out of all the stories that I was reading, and I call this theme Setting the Bar Low. Because many of the stories that were coming out during Corona were making me feel bad. I mean, people were saying, this is a time to learn a new language. This is a time you can get in shape. And this is a time for you to do all these great things. And at the same time, I was thinking, this is a time when, I'm just like overwhelmed. And there were some days when I didn't even take a shower and I didn't even change my clothes. And so I created a conversation or a series of stories that I called Set the Bar Low, because after days on end of no makeup and hair in a scrunchie, and some days I didn't shower, at least in the early days, I had a morning where I got up and I actually decided I was going to fix up. And here's a story that I shared about what happened when I did. I shared a picture of myself and I had makeup on and I actually had washed my hair. And I said, this is Julie. She set the bar low. Today she showered and she put on self-tanner. She washed and blow dried her hair and she put on a little bit of makeup and she put on something that was not PJs, a robe, and mismatched socks. And her guys here are making a really big deal over her, like a really big deal. And now she feels fancy because she didn't really have to do much. So hashtag set the bar low. And that story, again, because it was a bit on the humorous side, enabled people to laugh at themselves. And what happened as a result of that on social media became people telling their stories, and the hashtag became Set the Bar Low. So I'm going to turn it over now to my three friends that are helping me, and I'm going to ask you the same question. If you were to pick a theme of the stories that you shared during this time of Corona, what was the theme that you wanted to make sure people picked up on? Who would like to go first?
I can go first. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
If I were to pick a theme, I originally thought maybe it would be adventure, but then I think hashtag unexpected journey is maybe a little bit better for us. And I didn't come up with that. I stole that from The Hobbit. For me, a lot of what I was sharing with my stories on social media, so my personal brand, was really focused on my children. I think from going to a full-time working professional to a full-time working parenting professional was a bit of a tough transition. I'm a parent, but I also get a lot of how I feel about myself by how I'm doing at work. And so I threw a lot of myself into making sure that this transition was an easier one for them. And so daily I would show a little snippet of activities that we were doing together. And a lot of it was construction, that we were like making things because we couldn't go anywhere or really do anything. So we're just doing stuff around the house. And my son was in preschool and he had a show and tell for class, and he had been badgering me forever to build him a rocket ship. And so my husband and I worked together and we constructed him a huge rocket ship, of course, made out of beer boxes and wine boxes from the booth store because we had plenty on hand available. And it ended up being okay. And it was really something silly for him to show off his Miller Lite tower to his preschool class. He was really excited to get in, but it has been an unexpected journey for us.
I love it. Thank you so much, Jeff. Ellen, how about you?
Well, I was thinking about your story because I too have had an adult son that's needed to move back in. And it's actually been, I would say, my theme between my adult son and also my senior mothers. My theme would be move and change. When you get stuck in a coronavirus, my adult parents needed to get out of their apartment and move around, and you don't want to get too sediment, and you don't want, it has caused people to change the way they do things. And in my experience, people don't like change.
Right.
Had to.
Mm-hmm.
With the moving, it's also caused, so my son had to move in, so I cleaned out some things. I changed, I got rid of some things. You have to get rid of some things to make room to move other things in. So in my
great metaphor for life, that is, in general.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my goal in that is when my son does move back out, because he will, with the plan, is I'm going to change again. I'm going to have room, because we had to make the one change. Then I'm looking forward to when we make the next change. So I really think you should take a positive spin on change and think, what's happening now and what do I get to do later?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Kelly, how about you? What was your theme?
So I'm struggling to land on one theme because I was going through a lot of change. Some people may know I closed my brick and mortar clinic practice. And so I was really careful about what I shared because there was so much that was personally challenging at that time. Those boundaries with social media and everything like that can be really tricky. But I tried to share a balance. So I tried to share a bit of what was hard, but also some unexpected pleasant surprises. And interestingly enough, when I shared those things on my work page that were working, that I didn't really even plan, like, for example, treatment sessions that were in a backyard or a side yard of someone's house, I got so many messages from other people, other therapists and whatnot. So it was really interesting. People wanted to see the stuff that was working, the stuff that wasn't working. And when I shared kind of spontaneously, that's when I got a lot of people responding. So I don't know about the theme, but it was tricky. It was hard to find a balance.
Well, and I think, and I followed you very carefully, and I just felt like I was part of those stories that you were telling. It certainly was a story of being adaptable to me, because I knew that you were in the process of doing that. And then to be able to see some of those stories rise up from that showed, hey, and lots of people have used the word pivot as the theme to their story, but to show that, you know, okay, this is not what we planned, but here is something that's turning out to be even better. Was a story to me of great triumph. I'm looking at so many of the responses, and thank you guys so much for participating in this. And I just want to call out a few of those. Jen Alcorn, adapt and overcome. She writes, whatever that might look like. And that's so true. We don't really know sometimes. We have comforting. I love that. Frustration. Yes, it is frustration. We have resiliency. And Teresa was focused on self-improvement. Reframing is a great theme. We have grace and perseverance. I love that. And I love the word grace. I love what that implies. Many people were looking at unexpected journeys, self-growth. We have do it messy. That's a good one too. That would have been a good one for me if you would have seen what I actually looked like. It was definitely messy. But the most important thing is that we did embrace the change, and that the stories that we used, as we look back on that quote again, were not stories that that maligned or that created a disconnect for people, but they were stories that served to join us together and to make us realize that we're all in this together and that we're going to get through it. And so whether your theme and your approach is to do it, you know, real and raw, or whether, like me, the way that I approach things is to laugh at what stresses me, and I call that what stresses you blesses you, in a way. It is like Farron is writing, perspective is everything, and that you get to choose. And that attitude that we create in the stories that we tell is very important. So thank you. On your handout, you will notice that I wanted to talk a little bit about the types of stories that there are. And, you know, you can read up on storytelling and you can see there are lots of different kinds of stories. I have 4 main types of stories that I like to use, and I use them at different times and in combination with each other in a way that I feel intuitively is going to be the most impactful in getting my message out. As Jen mentioned in my introduction, I just finished doing a total pivot of my annual Souls of Love charity event, which was celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year. And I was so looking forward to having a big hoopla here at our farm. We were going to be celebrating in such a big way because our anniversary theme was going to be silver and gold. And then, of course, like so many other nonprofits, you know, COVID hit, and we're looking at a nonprofit endeavor thinking, what in the world are we going to do? And so the stories that I want to share with you are an example of how I was able to take something that I was so looking forward to, but change it in such a way that yet we were still successful. Last year during our endeavor, we had collected 1,840 pairs of shoes. Because this was our 10th anniversary, I thought it would be kind of fun from a marketing standpoint if we set a goal to collect 2020 pairs of shoes, 2,020 pairs of shoes. And I knew it was a stretch, but I am happy to say that because we were able to be creative, we collected a total of 2,870 pairs of shoes. So we blew it out of the water, which I'm so very humbled and proud of. First and foremost, that was a story about a community that decided we were not going to be overcome by something like COVID. And it was a story about people who opened up their hearts and opened up their wallets and just decided that they were going to look after our kids in a way that we have never looked out for before. But what I would like to do is share with you the different ways that I used those 4 kinds of stories to create the dialogue and to set the scene so that that was able to happen. So the first kind of story is a story that educates. So if you will, make sure that you note educate is a purpose and a type of story. And stories that educate are typically stories that will answer the questions, what? What is it that you're trying to share with us? Stories that educate are typically stories that, that communicate the vision for your business, your cause, your nonprofit, your passion. They are stories that you will craft and that you will share that will let people know what's going on, basically. So in my situation with Souls of Love, the stories that I crafted, and these were the first types of stories that I would share, both in social media as well as verbally. I talked about what is Souls of Love, the fact that we were celebrating our 10-year anniversary. I talked about the immense need that there was in the community. I talked about and shared stories about how COVID had impacted families in need to an entirely different level. And so those stories were somewhat factual, okay? And you will use those types of educational stories throughout any type of promotion that you happen to do. The second kind of story are stories to inform. They are stories that provide information. And so these are stories for me that I created that answered the question, how can I help? Okay. How can I help? What can I do? My stories during this phase, which again, were often at the beginning, but trickled throughout the months that we were promoting this cause, they centered around providing options for people as far as how they could help. They were stories that talked about donating. They were stories that set up and asked for people to volunteer, to be drop-off locations. They were stories that said, buy the shoes, send money, send them to me, share my story. It was providing information that anyone who was listening could follow along. My stories during that phase also center around people who were involved. I thought it was important that I provide information to people about who else was part of this, so that they were aware that this was a community effort and not something that I was certainly doing on my own. I also gave people an opportunity to share their stories about how they got involved and why they got involved. And that was an important part of it as well, to focus on the people, to give other people information about what their peers were doing. So we have stories that educate, we have stories that inform, but now we get to the good stuff, and we get to the stuff that I love most when I'm being a storyteller. There's a beautiful quote that I live by that says, logic makes us think, but emotion moves us to action. Logic makes us think, but emotion moves us to action. You think about that. Think about most big changes that you have made in your life. Most of the time, there has been some type of an emotional shift, an emotional appeal, an emotional decision. Many times we act with our hearts. We think with our hearts, not necessarily our minds. And I think women, sometimes we are notorious for that. And that's, I think, one of the things that makes us like truly who we are. And so the next two types of stories there are plays on that theme, that logic makes us think. It's important to be educating people. It's important to give them information. However, if we truly want to move people to take action, we do the next two. And so the next kind of story that I love to tell, and I certainly did throughout our Soul's adventure, were stories of inspiration. Stories that inspire. And stories that inspire are different than stories that educate and inform, because they're told in a way that creates a sense of connection between people, creates a sense of community. And stories that inspire, and thinking even about all the stories that have been out on social media since this started, stories that inspire are stories that highlight the good in this world. And there is still, in spite of everything that is happening, there is still good in this world. And so when we craft those types of stories and we share those with others, we start seeing a shift in people. We see an emotional shift. So in my case, and how I wanted to create that spirit of inspiration, I decided, hey, it was a 10-year anniversary. And so I decided to take everybody on a journey with me. And so throughout several weeks, I began with the very first year that I hosted a tiny little party in my backyard and had 75 women show up and collected a whopping 100 pairs of shoes. And I shared that story. And I shared what I remembered about it. I shared what I learned about it. I shared with people who was there and who jumped on board and said, yes, I want to be a part of this. And so each year got its own little highlight. And I got so much feedback. And it was interesting to see in that particular year that I would highlight, I would show how this effort has grown and how the people who have come on board with this effort have been such a part of the success story. Because that's really when you're sharing stories of inspiration, you're sharing with others successes and triumphs. And so people felt connected at that point. The other way that we can share inspiration, and we see a lot of it, is sharing on video. Video is a beautiful way to capture the heart and the soul of a message. Again, whether it's a cause that you're promoting or whether it's your business that you're promoting. We were going to try to share some of those videos that I was going to use as examples, and unfortunately Zoom would not allow us to do that. So Jen and Caitlin have graciously offered to share a couple of the videos that I would like for you to learn from on our Facebook page later this week. So please, by all means, check back in and watch the video and just look at the elements of it and ask yourself, as it relates to the story, how is this story able to inspire me or inspire others in a way that a story that informs or a story that educates cannot? Okay, and you'll see the dramatic shift. And that is something that I use all the time because it helps people to be emotionally invested in your cause. So once again, we have stories that educate, we have stories that inform, we have stories that inspire, but then we get to my favorite, and we have stories that entertain. Stories that entertain take things to a whole new level. And as I mentioned earlier, for me, stories that have a humorous base to it help me to get the point across in a way that people are able to laugh and have a good time. And research shows, and this is true about learning in all ways, that when we can laugh and we can have fun, we learn more, we retain more, we remember a message more if it's done in a spirit of fun. And so, you know, we're well into this whole Souls of Love thing. And even though I continued to share, this is where you drop off, this is how you can donate, these are the kinds of shoes that I would like for you to donate, people still were not getting it. And so I thought, okay, we're going to have some fun, and it's time to break out some stories that entertain. So I want to share with you 2 examples of how I was able to do that and the impact that an entertaining story can have on an effort that an educational or an informational story cannot. So at one point, here's what I shared on social media. And if you are a big fan of Dr. Seuss, you will love it. So here we go. That souls of love, that souls of love. I do so like that souls of love. I will take them, all your shoes, black and gray and even blue. I will take them in the box, and I will take them paired with socks. I will take them big or small. I do not care, we need them all. You may buy, then ship to me, or simply send me your money. Then I will order shoes for you. I'll make it easy. That's what I'll do. I have a lot of drop-off friends. That list is long. It never ends. My friends will meet you at your place, your home, your work, or outer space. Then next week they will turn them in, and you will see our kids will win. COVID will see what we're made of, because the winner will soon be Souls of Love. I'm here all week, kids, by the veal. So when I did that, a crazy thing happened. People were laughing, they were engaged, they were part of the conversation, and they got it. And I think in a crazy way, they got it through my humor that, okay, I am tired of saying the same thing over and over again. It's not coincidence that that particular post, that particular story that I shared, got liked and engagement and conversation in a way that none of the other types of stories that I told did. So Souls of Love, as I shared with you, was a story of community and great success. We ended up exceeding our expectations this year for the kids of the community. And so I thought it was important to have a little bit more fun right at the very end. And so I'd like to share with you one final way that we had a story that entertained. In the spirit of Dr. Seuss, now we're looking at How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Here we go. Most folks that I know like people a lot, but COVID was different. He certainly did not. He didn't like freedom, embraces, or hugs. He didn't like seeing our big smiling mugs. He caused such a ruckus, we scattered for cover. We protected our children, our friends, and our mothers. We camped out at home. We ate lots of chips. Companies closed and morale took a dip. The nonprofits panicked. We need to raise funds. This year is all over and it's hardly begun. I was no different. I was mourning for souls. It was our 10th anniversary. I had set some big goals, but COVID was wicked. My heart filled with dread. To a wonderful, awesome thing happened instead. I yelled, "Suck it, COVID. Go ahead, do your worst. The people I know will still act with their purse. The loyals all gathered. It's the children we choose. We'll just be creative and we'll still get those shoes." And shoes they did gather. They opened their heart. The companies, everyone, they all did their part. Shoes rolled in by the hundreds. They came every day. Poor COVID was baffled. He had little to say because nothing can stop a town where we live. Nothing can stop a heart when it gives. You knew not defeat. You saw opportunity. Thank you, dear friends, for your great show of unity. The shoe count is still climbing, but one thing is true. You are my people, and I will always love you. So as you can see, there are so many ways that we can craft a story to create a dialogue and a narrative that has a huge impact on our listeners. So to repeat, stories that educate, stories that inform, stories that inspire, and then my all-time favorite, stories that entertain. And so now to you listeners, I'm asking you, what are the stories, the kinds of stories that you love most to share? What are the types of stories that work best in your work, in your life, in promoting your causes so that you can have a better impact? Please put your comments in the chat section, and I am going to call on my friends again to ask them what are the types of stories you like to use. Kelly, let's start with you.
I would say, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I would say that I do a lot of educating and informing because as a therapist, I have parents and other OTs that follow me. And as I listened to you talk, Julie, I realized I might need to do a little more entertaining because it can get too much information, you know, especially now, people are overloaded. But over, the last 6 months, I think I've done some educating, I've done some informing. But the really cool part is sharing the pictures of kids when parents let me do that. Because I think those pictures are inspiring for other therapists and even people to see not only what I do, but the benefit that the kids get. And, some of my favorite pictures are the ones where there is that connection. And I think you're right that connection it makes such a difference in what people take from a message if they can connect with it emotionally. It's huge. So those are my favorites, but I need to do more of that.
And the important thing, though, is that we mix them up. It's not that they happen in a sequence particularly. We usually start off with stories that inform and stories that educate, but it's important that we go back and forth between all of these kinds of stories. You will find, though, that when you do share a story that inspires or a story that entertains, particularly for entertaining, it allows your audience to see a glimpse of you that is different. Okay, it allows the audience to see you as a person and not solely just you as the professional doing the job. So good luck to you on that. Ellen, how about you? What kind of stories do you typically?
Well, I live in the technology world, and I create websites, and I'm always talking to somebody who technically usually has something broken.
Yes. Yeah.
And they always think it's them, and half the time it is them, but they always feel bad about themselves, like they broke it or they don't know what they're doing. And many people just think they're so not technology savvy. And so I can't just be informing and educational all the time, even though I am, because I'm trying to fix their problem. But I do give a lot of stories of entertainment and tell them how I've had many people to do the same thing. You're not the only person. Let me tell you what this one guy did. So I try to make it very lighthearted. So when they walk away with not only their problem fixed, they don't feel bad about breaking something they don't understand.
Right.
So when you're in this dry world of technology and people that don't use it every day, but they do use it, but now it won't work, you've got to make them feel like they're comfortable to go back to using it. So I do try to throw in a bunch of jokes and humorous things, and you're not the only person that's done this. It's normal. So that's
I call what you just shared, and I'm so glad that you said that. I call those war stories. And that could be a whole different category in and of itself. War stories are, and we all should have a whole collection of war stories that enable someone to realize that they're not alone.
They're not.
Over the years, I've done a lot of training for new speakers and given them feedback. And invariably, someone will say, "Oh, I'm so afraid I'm going to get up there and forget to say something or forget a word." And I bring out my war stories. And I'm like, "You think that's bad? Well, let me tell you about the time I was standing up in front of a group and I split my pants." And so I'll share that story. And so when you share those war stories, it makes us feel like we're not alone. And we do it in a way that is so non-threatening. So thank you for bringing.
And they feel more comfortable when they go on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Jess, how about you?
So I work for the public library system here in Frederick County. So I support all 9 branches. And then for the 6 months, I would think, like all of us and all of our businesses, our communication has been predominantly to inform, right? Because there's so much change and just really letting people know what we're doing. We have been able to find opportunities to inspire, and one of our favorite recent communications was right as we closed our library branches to the public. We sent out a communication to all of our library customers and our supporters saying, "You've been here for us, and now is a time when we need to be here for you. So while our branches are closed, here's how we are still working for you." And I think all of our communication has been really centered on this idea of loyalty. Like your businesses out there, we know that the library means different things to different people. For us, some people rely on the library to have air conditioning and some comfort during the day. Some people use it as their exclusive access to computer and technology and the internet, which we know is essential to being successful in today's world. And then for some people like myself, it's a convenience. So we try to address all of those stories and let folks know here's the way in which our company, our organization is still working and trying to inspire folks to, still use our services in the way in which we're able to provide. Now that we have sort of, crisis management is still happening, but it is not in the same sort of panicked feeling that we had initially. We've been able to integrate some entertaining stories on our social media platform. I think every organization has a personality, and our personality, I think, is a really fun one.
Yeah, it is.
Quirky, we're definitely super nerdy, but we're also friendly and approachable. And an example is we've had a recent one of saying, how do you gauge 6 feet apart? Well, for us, that's 61 Danielle Steele novels. So if you needed a metric, we had a virtual fundraiser that we ran that we had a bunch of pictures of reading, which is a big thing for us, but it's our brand and our personality. And so we choose the vehicle and the time because mood has to match messaging, but we've been able to hit on some of the stories that you've talked about to let us engage with our customers and our supporters.
And I've been following your stories all along the way as well. And one of the things that I appreciated about what the library was doing was consistency. And that's the thing, when we're promoting a cause, when we're promoting our brand or whatever it is, it's important that we're consistent. And you all were always out there. You were varying the type as well, but you were consistently getting that message out, which is so very important. So thank you for that. I'm loving also trying to read some of the comments at the same time. Meg brought up Dean Olivia White from Hood just recently posted a video, which was a story that they were sharing on how to follow the rules and obey the rules at Hood coming back to school. I saw it too. It was so much fun. It was entertaining. And to see a woman of that stature and that professionalism do a story like that, that in essence, was enabling her to laugh at herself, was such a great, great way of using those stories to entertain. So thank you all. I'll continue to read some of the comments a little bit later, but in the interest of time, I want to continue on. Next, you'll notice on your handout that I have what I want to share with you are tips for how to create a more impactful story. And there are definitely some things that we need to keep in mind. I will make sure that I kind of go through all of them, and then I'd like to share a story with you at the end that sort of encompasses all of these things. The first one is your fill in the blank is know your audience. That is one of the basic first things that you need to do when you're crafting stories, is to know who is it that you're talking to, or who is it that you want to talk to. Do your research, find out, and even after you find out, take some time perhaps to interview or talk with some of the people that are important to you, and find out, how do they prefer to be communicated with? How do they prefer to have you craft your story? Not every story that we share is suitable for every single audience. As someone who's been in the speaking industry for a long, long time, I have found that out the hard way many, many times. And so as a result, I have different stories that I share with different groups and segments of the population. I can tell you now that when I am in front of a group of women, the stories that I share are totally different than the stories that I will share if I'm doing a leadership training class in a mixed gender environment. Totally different. And I also know that from training that the stories that I may tell if I'm training CPAs are quite different than the stories that I'm going to tell if I'm training the leadership team at a warehouse facility. I remember once very, very early on in my career, it was a leadership development training, and I was sharing some kind of a story about how the people who lead are not the ones that are necessarily doing the work, but they have to motivate and they have to lead the people to do the job. And I remember sharing a story about going to the symphony, because I love the symphony, and I was talking about the conductor, and that the conductor is not actually playing the instruments, but the conductor is leading, blah, blah, blah. I was telling this great story. And let's just say it was an audience that were looking at me like, seriously, the symphony? No, I don't even get that. And so it became very apparent to me that I needed to make sure that my stories match their world. And so many times in order to know the audience, you have to ask them questions. You know, how many of you like NASCAR? I will say, how many of you like this? How many of you are sports fans? And if I know that the audience is receptive to those kinds of stories, then those are the stories that I share. We will hear what we want to hear, and so we need to make sure that we provide a platform so they can hear it. So number one tip is know your audience. Number two in your handout is know why your story is important. Know why your story is important. And I know I've hinted about this a little bit before, about the importance of the why, but that's the basic. If you're not knowing already why your story is important, you're just making noise. You're not having an impact. Knowing the why changes what you say, and it changes how you say it. And the why is what gives your message and your story meaning. And meaning matters. So I have often shared this with other people when I am trying to decide if a message is important enough. I ask myself, does my message pass the quiver test? And for me, if I am sharing a story and I can feel that my voice starts to shake or a little bit, or it starts to quiver, then I know my why is right there. It's front and center, and it is a voice that cannot be silenced. And if I can talk so freely and so almost, apart from the emotion of a message, it's become mundane to me. And perhaps it's time for me to find a new cause, or find a new purpose, or find a new message to share. So think about that. Think about the times when you have been communicating with other people and you feel that little catch in your throat, and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm gonna cry. Congratulations, girlfriend, because you have passed that test and you know why your story is important and why you need to tell it. So that is step number two. Number three, I went through my goodie bag last night when I got home, which was super cool. And the thing that I loved the most, even though everything was super, I love this sticker. Oh my gosh. And I'm already trying to decide where I'm going to post it here in my office. But she speaks her truth. And so number three in how to make a more impactful story is be brave. Be brave, because it takes bravery, it takes courage to speak your truth. There is, I guarantee you, someone out there who needs you to speak your truth. There's someone out there who needs you to be brave. And you have to just find that audience that needs to hear your bravery. I know that I have a lot of friends online with me right now, and I know that so many of you know what my journey has been like. But for the past 12 years, my husband and I have been on a journey trying to deal with his Parkinson's diagnosis. And I, will tell you that when we first received that diagnosis, it rocked our world in a way that I cannot even begin to articulate. And for several years, we were well into the journey. We did not share our story with anyone. Our family knew, my very close friends knew, but it was a story that it was important for us to keep among the people who are close to our heart, because we were still trying to figure out how we were going to navigate through this. And so something happened one day that made it obvious that it was time to share that story. And it was quite a few years ago. It was Giving Tuesday, if you all know Giving Tuesday. My husband and I give a lot of donations, a lot of money to the Michael J. Fox Foundation, because we believe in what he is doing. And so my husband was in his office across the hall from me, and he was making our annual donation. And he said, it's Giving Tuesday. If I make the donation today, there is an anonymous donor who will match all of the contributions that come in on Giving Tuesday. So I'm going to do it. And I said, okay, that's perfect. So I'm sitting over in my office and I'm thinking, I think it's time. I think it's time to share the story so other people will also make donations. And so I walked over and I said, can I write a blog about this? Can I ask people, can I share what we're dealing with? And can I share our need and our hope that people will also support Michael J. Fox? And he said, yes, but I need to read it. And I'm like, of course. So I sat down and I wrote this blog post, and it was called The Face of Parkinson's. And I shared our journey. And when I was finished, he came over, he sat down at my desk and he read it and he was quiet. And I said, what do you think? And he said, let's do it. And so we hit the button. And we hit the button and we cried. And we're like, now this story is taking flight because we were brave. And we decided that we were going to let other people in. And all of a sudden, this amazing thing started to happen. It was ping, 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 ping. Response after response after response came on social media and said, just made a donation. We're doing it. We're here for you. Made a donation. We're giving money. And it made me realize that just by being brave, we were able to amplify the voice that we had. And so what it also created by being brave is that it created an audience that needed to hear it. And here's my point. It's not a story that I share with everybody. It's not a story that I share with often. But being brave in that moment allowed mostly women who contacted me and said, I know I don't know you very well, but my husband was just diagnosed and I do not know what to do. And so we would meet for coffee, or we would, just meet or talk over the phone, and I would share my story and she would share her fears, and we would talk together about how we are both going to be caregivers and we are going to be strong and we are going to be brave. And so that's what I want you to do as well, is be brave in sharing that message. Point number 4, I want you to paint the picture. There is a very fine line between providing enough detail in a story and putting so much detail in a story that we have lost our audience, we have lost our listener. And so all I can tell you when it comes to crafting your story is that it just takes practice. It takes being able to read people and to know if your story is so long and so detailed that you have lost the listener, then just come back and give them the highlights, give them the top reel, just give them the points that they need to know. Use lots of visual descriptors in your painting of the picture. Create a picture with words in such a way that people feel like that they are there. I have to tell you real quickly, a dear friend of mine, Rebecca Lehman, just gave me as a gift the most beautiful book that I'm reading right now, and it's called 100 Days Dying to Tell His Story. And it was written by her sister, who is telling the story about the life and the death of their father. And as I've started reading the book, it just brought this point home about painting the picture. The words that she uses and the emotion that she creates with those words remind me of when I was with my father-in-law, and reminds me of when I was with my mother-in-law, when they were, transitioning to their next life. And so that's the power of creating just the right picture, so that people not only are hearing that story, but they feel like they're reliving theirs as well. So paint that picture. Also, you've heard the expression that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Make it visual. Go beyond using just the words. Use video, use photos, and allow people to fully be immersed in that story. Point number 5, engage the listener. Engage the listener. As I said earlier, when telling my story, and I said this at the very beginning of today, I believe in conversation, not presentation. Presentation is one way. Conversation is mutual. It's an experience. It's a relationship. And so the best way, if you want to engage your listener, is to ask questions. Ask questions that put them front and center. Make it not always about you. Make it also about them. Listen to their story. and find the ways that both of your stories intersect with each other in a way that you have created common ground. Number 6, I'm sorry. This is the final step in creating a more impactful story. Pass the baton. And what that means is, how can you make your story, your experience, how can you make it relatable to other people? How can you make what you experienced about them? Because my life is different than yours, and your life is different from someone else's. But when we share a story in such a way that then we pass the baton to someone else, we have now made that a communal effort, and we have made that a community. One of the most impactful ways that we can pass the baton is to answer the question in your story, what did I learn? Because although they may not have the same experience that you've had, if you share what you learned from it, it becomes a learning experience for them. And so maybe that learning experience is a different whole story from what your story was, but it makes them able to relate. So a couple years ago, I guess it was maybe 2017, 2018, my son Craig, the one that had stayed with us for 8 months during COVID, he was living in the Middle East, working at the time, and he was feeling a little bit bored with life. And so he decided that he wanted to like stir things up. And so he said, I'm going to be climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And that was his answer to being bored with life. I find it kind of ironic because when I'm bored with life, I get a facial and I bake a pan of brownies and eat the whole thing, but not my son. So he decided that this was something that he was going to do that was going to shake his world. And so for months on end leading up to it, he did everything that he was supposed to do. He trained like crazy. He bought all the right gear that would accommodate so many different types of climates. As you can imagine, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, there's all types of climate that you run into. He read everything that he could get his hands on, everything. He actually talked to people that had climbed it, and he got tips and tricks and strategies from them on what to do. He recruited his girlfriend to also go along on this adventure. She is no longer his girlfriend, so perhaps that says something. However, the last thing that he did was that he contracted or hired a company that provides guides that take you on these trips, and that's something that they, require when you climb Mount Kilimanjaro, is you go with a crew. I don't know what you call it. So anyway, he tells a story about this adventure, and it is, in the interest of time, I can't share it all, but I can tell you it was just a beautiful, beautiful story about the experience. And, in the 5.5 days that it takes to reach the top of the summit, he shares stories of challenges and obstacles and attitude adjustments. And then he shares stories where it almost felt surreal, where, he was having moments that just, people dream about, almost euphoric in nature. But the story that I want to share with you was the story that happened on the final evening. They had already been hiking for 5 days. They were tired, as you can imagine. And they had just set up camp, and they had eaten the final dinner that they would have before they reached the summit. And at dinner, the guides said to the crew, or to the group that was hiking together, said, when you're finished eating, I need you to go back to your tent, settle in, and get to sleep. And it was early, obviously. But he said, because at 12 o'clock midnight, we're going to be coming by and we're going to be waking you up. And we are going to start that last 4 to 5 hours trek to the summit. And we want to start it at midnight because we want to see to it that when you reach the summit, the sun is coming up. And he was excited. He was nervous. He said he didn't sleep at all. But he had been telling me that throughout the whole climb, over the days, that he used to have this little mantra that he would say to himself. And I don't even remember what the little mantra or what the saying was that he would say when he said things were getting a little bit, tiring or tricky. It was something that a motivational speaker would say, I'm sure, about attitude or you can do this or whatever. But he said on the final morning when they woke them up and they started the last 4 hours in the wee hours of the morning, he said the altitude was so crazy that he, was having trouble breathing. He said he was having, just trouble focusing, and he was so tired. And he said it was almost like I felt like I was out of my body. He said I just could not even think straight, and I was so close. And he said I couldn't even think of my mantra. He said I couldn't even think of the slogan that for the last couple of days I had been saying over and over. And he said, I guess the guy that I was walking with must have looked over and he realized I was really struggling. He goes, Mom, he looked at me and he said, you just don't quit. You just don't quit. And he said that became my mantra. And for 4 hours, the final 4 hours, when he could hardly breathe and he felt like crazy, he said over and over, I just kept saying, I'm just not going to quit. I'm just not going to quit. And he made it to the summit, and he made it just in time to see the sunrise. And he made it in time to realize that, life can be shook up from time to time, and that life is beautiful, and that we can overcome all kinds of obstacles to reach what it is that we want. And when he shared that story with me, and I share this story with you, here is my point. I can tell you now, I will never climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And chances are good, you probably won't either. I'm sure there's somebody here that probably will. But I know the feeling that he evoked when he shared that story, because he passed the baton. Because you see, I know what it feels like to be so tired and to be so out of it that I think I can't finish, I can't go on. And you do too. I know that we both know what it feels like to get in our car and to just cry and let it all out and get out of that car and go into that meeting or go into our home and do what we have to do and just keep saying to ourselves, I'm just not going to quit. I know what that feels like, and I know you know what that feels like too. And I know what it feels like to reach the summit. I know the euphoria that it feels like. I know, and I know that you know what it feels like to be in a place, in a moment at a time, when you are doing something that you are so into and that you so love that you think it doesn't get better than this. And then you realize that you are exactly where you need to be. We all know that. And so Craig's story about Mount Kilimanjaro is really a story about us, because he knows how to pass the baton, and he knows how to make, and we know how to make a story about us and a story of community. And so whatever your story is, just remember the mantra is that we just don't quit. So I am watching our time very carefully. And I know that there are going to be some beautiful, heart-wrenching, inspirational, funny, crazy stories come out of this week. And I hope that what I've been able to share with you is a how-to that you can take and begin to look at your life as a storyteller. And I'll leave you with this. One of my favorite all-time movies, and it's an oldie, is Pretty Woman. And you may remember in Pretty Woman, from time to time, they would share a man who it appeared perhaps he was homeless in the story, but he would roam around the city of LA and he would say, what's your story? Ha ha, what's your story? And that's what I want to leave you with today, is what is your story? And how can you more eloquently, more passionately, bring it into the world? So our time is up. And I just want to thank all of you for coming. I remind you that you can ask questions that are on Facebook. if you have any questions, please by all free know that I am here and know that I am rooting you on. So bye-bye.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much for spending your time with us.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone, we'll have this up in the Facebook group later today. Have a wonderful Monday.